What were your thoughts, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, from what I remember, I think the main conclusive point we came to was, if I'm gonna say moments like the lady with the $2, that hey, that moment might be, might be God, might be God, might not be God. If all those moments or everything I feel like is God may not be there, or I guess if I don't have definitive proof either way, why why go with God, like if and I know another point you made was, you're an atheist and you're happy to chase good. And at one point I even said I meet a lot of I might meet a higher percentage of atheists who are trying to do good than there are theists, but that's just my own personal bias.
Sure. I think one thing that I was reflecting on a little bit was this idea. It sounded there was a point I remember in that conversation last time where I think you said something like you felt that you would be that giving the $2 to the lady would have felt less. The feeling would be less pleasant if you were to know for sure that there was that there wasn't a God, or that you'd at least been mistaken about your experience with the light. That struck me quite a bit, I think, because I think it speaks to something about the nature of being good being its own reward, which is, I think, where we were coming to. Like I think you indicated that having had this experience with the lady and it being a positive one, you could, and not necessarily being certain that it came from a God. Yeah, that God, maybe you couldn't tell for sure that a God didn't orchestrate this or did orchestrate this. That if we were to imagine there was no God and you'd still had that experience, like you would now, knowing what you now know, would still choose to give the lady the $2. Was that right? Did I remember that correctly?
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know if yeah, now, well, I guess can you say that again? I guess I don't know if it's the same.
Yeah, no problem. So I guess we talked about whether or not. So you were really candid, I think, in the last conversation, and you were saying that you didn't necessarily know that it would definitely be a God that orchestrated that situation with the lady and the $2. And I think I asked you something like, if you could somehow discover that you had been mistaken about the experience that you had with this light that has made you feel that there is a God or gods perhaps acting in the world that orchestrated this situation with this lady, if you could know that wasn't correct somehow, that you'd misunderstood that situation, would you still want to, now knowing what you know about how nice it felt to do the nice thing for the lady, would you still do the nice thing? And I believe you said that you would. Does that make sense?
Well, and yeah, I guess I may have said that. Yeah, I guess, because how I remember it is, if I could travel back in time to a year ago, and before I even believed in God and told myself about this scenario and how good it would have felt, I don't think I would have been able to convince myself to do it, my old self.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and yeah, like let's say today I stopped believing in God. At least at this moment, I would be more willing to give her the $2. And honestly, I don't know if I would or not if I stopped believing in God.
Okay, that's cool. So
Um,
did you acknowledge that the feeling of giving the lady the $2 was a feeling that you enjoyed, right? That it made you feel good to have done that? Like you were glad that you did it.
Yeah, I am glad I did it because um, I am glad I did it because of how much of an effect it had for her, you know?
Right. Right. I think we talked about how much value you got from a $2 value. And today's economy, that's $2 doesn't go very far. So that's not a bad trade, right?
Yeah.
So in this situation, if what part of this experience was making you feel good, would you say?
Yeah, I guess. See, and I guess this doesn't fully answer your question, but I do think an important detail is, well, it felt good because I did. I think it felt good because I did care about her, and I did care about her because of my belief in God.
Okay.
And I know that doesn't mean everybody else has,
Oh no, not
you know,
at all. No, that's fine. Yeah, I hear you. So it felt good because you believed in God. That's why you felt caring about the lady felt good.
yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, because if I see, I don't know how I would act if I stopped believing in God. But I don't. I think if I didn't believe in God, I don't. Well, I feel pretty certain I wouldn't care about other people as much. I'm not saying I would start hitting
Hmm.
people in the face, but I wouldn't. I wouldn't start helping people. I would just care about myself.
But even if we were just to be selfish, um, have you heard about the problem of altruism? Have you heard about this? It's a sort of philosophical problem.
Wait, can I take a guess at it? Is it like?
Yeah, sure.
Is it because I think I saw a simulation of this? Is it like the idea that if everybody is good, then the people who are good get taken advantage of?
Oh, that's not quite the problem of altruism. That's about game theory, I think. So I think the problem of altruism is this idea that it's impossible to truly do something selfless that's not selfish in some way. So even if you were to donate your huge amounts of money to charity and live in poverty yourself and only work for others, there's an argument to say that in doing so, you get something from that experience that you value, which might be the sense of doing this action for other people, right? That it's not totally selfish
Yeah,
because you do get something from that act. And I think that speaks to this idea that we could have selfish reasons for doing nice things for other people. Like in one sense, we could say, we want to promote certain norms and values in our culture and society so that we might benefit them were we to have the need of them, right? So maybe next time you're the guy that needs the $2 and it's the lady that's walking past you, right? By doing the kind thing with the lady and giving her the $2, if you were ever in a similar situation, like you would argue that in your society you've made it slightly more likely that somebody might do the same thing for you, because you're normalizing that virtue of helping somebody who needs it if you can. And that might make your well-being more secure and safe, right? Does that make sense?
yeah, it does. Okay, I like how you framed that. Um, yeah, like, and let me know if this is going off track a bit at all. It's always a fear of mine to go off track,
That's good.
but yeah, from my atheist perspective with nihilism, I almost saw, looking at it from that perspective, the idea that there is no, we're only good because we want to be treated that way. I almost really almost leads me to think it's bad. And I know that's
Could you
so
say that? Could
backwards
you say
from how
that?
most of,
Could sorry, you broke up just as you said that last part. Could you say that one more time, please? Sorry.
yeah, it's okay. Yeah, like from that perspective, we're only being good because we want other people to get encourage other to be people to be good. I I would say I feel that from that perspective, I would say good is bad. Or, and that's
Okay.
a weird wording. Or trying to, I
No,
would
no, I
say,
understand. Yeah. I think could we say that being good was selfish in that sense?
yeah, I could. And I think we need to add something to it because I almost, from from the atheist perspective, I feel like, uh, let's say somebody who is extremely selfish, just trying to make money, and somebody who takes advantage of people if it works. I honestly can't. So that's selfish is
Jo-
bad, but this
Jonathan, I'm so sorry. Your internet's cutting out quite a bit again. Sorry, could you repeat that one more time? We're having a bit of technical issues, it seems. Hello,
I'm
you there, bud?
gonna go outside again. See.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you. So sorry.
Um, wait, can you hear me now? I went outside.
Yeah. That sounds better. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, sweet. Thank God. Or yeah, thank goodness. Um,
Either way.
I didn't mean to do that.
It's all good, man.
So, so from the atheist perspective, I see someone. Well, because you said, yeah, can we say that somebody's being good is being selfish? And I think I need to clarify from the atheist perspective. I don't see somebody who is being straight selfish, of like trying to get as much money as they can, lying to take advantage of other people. From the atheist perspective, I don't see them as bad. I actually think it would be a good thing for them to go make as much money as they can and make as much of life as they can. And whereas somebody who is trying to be good, in order to encourage that good behavior to come back to them, we can call it selfish. I can see where the definition for selfish is. As far as my perspective, like, I don't know if there's a word to describe how I see it, because if I'm saying that somebody who's trying to do things for their self-interest as good, um, I just see them as being backwards. I
I
see
hear
them
you. Yeah.
I see them as I actually see them maybe even as more manipulative than somebody who lies to take advantage. In some ways, the person who tells other people to be good for their own self-interest is the same as somebody who is just trying to make as much money as possible.
Maybe. I think there are a few things we might be able to say, and let's see. There's a few things I want to see if you agree with. So, would you agree that that being selfish isn't in general a good thing?
Yeah, I mean, I have two answers here. With me believing that there's a God,
Mm-hmm.
with me believing that there's a God, I don't think selfishness is necessarily a good thing. Um, but from the atheist perspective, I think selfishness is all we have.
Okay, that's cool. Um, being in good, uh, so doing a good thing could be seen if maybe what if we replace the word selfish from with improving our well-being, right, which might not be much of a distinction, right? So maybe this is still just selfishness with an extra step, but if we do things to improve our own personal well-being, is that something that is bad from a God's perspective?
Yeah, well-being, I would say that. Yeah, well-being is a striving for well-being is a good thing.
Okay, cool. Right. But could we see how we might get to well-being, optimizing for our own well-being, as inherently that is a selfish act, right?
Right. Yeah, we're getting into semantics.
Maybe. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. Um,
That's perfectly fine as an observation. I think maybe you're more than right about that. I guess what I would then what I would say is like, if optimizing for our well-being isn't inherently a bad thing, and that doing good things in our society helps us optimize for our well-being, as in that is in essence what it's doing, right? We're making a society where we would benefit from being a part of a nice, kind society than we would necessarily a hostile society. Then it feels like there's an inherent benefit to acting kindly in our society, like a selfish benefit, like an immediate benefit to us personally, that we essentially are helping to optimize the society to get into a situation where that society will most likely be nurturing and beneficial to us as individuals. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, this is really, I will say this is really challenging my beliefs. So please bear with me if I sound contradictory.
No, not at all, mate.
Yeah, I guess I don't think I gave her the $2 in order for in in order to try to incentivize her to be good. I don't think I gave her the $2 for that reason.
Sure. I can understand that. Yeah.
And I'm not saying I was selfless either necessarily.
Sure. So this is just one aspect of it. Why I don't necessarily, I can't speak to what motivated you in that instance. Maybe you were motivated purely by the idea of God or gods acting in that moment. But I think what is interesting is to look at maybe where there might be different reasons why one might choose to act good in the world, and why it might be beneficial even if there aren't God or gods in the world, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess this is just an example of where you could want to act good in the world, in your society, because it actually helps you in terms of optimizing for your personal well-being.
Yeah. I guess I want to frame it from this perspective. Let's say if somebody did something nice for me, and let's say at the end, if they said, "Hey, I hope this encourages you to do more good,"
Mm-hmm.
um, I wouldn't give into this urge, but I would have the urge to flip them off, or even just maybe even spit in their face. I wouldn't give into those urges. Oh, atheist me would have flipped them off when if somebody said something like that to me.
Okay. Well, that's I don't think we necessarily have to do it knowingly with those motives, or even say that that's part of the I mean, I suspect most people will act in the world trying to represent what they would consider virtues they would want to see reflected back on them, without necessarily knowing that that's what they're doing. Like I think it's a motivator to act well in the world, right? Because from a game theory perspective, from a kind of how to optimize for your own well-being perspective, it makes sense as a strategy.
Yeah.
But there are other reasons why we might want to act well in the world. So, do you have is there an animal that are you a dog person or a cat person?
Well, I would say I might be more of a cat person, but I've had both.
No worries. So if you had a cat, like a new kitten, say, and like there are two things you could do with that cat, right? You could hurl it at a wall, or you could stroke the cat. Are those two things equal in your mind?
Wait, so what are the options? Throw it at a wall, or what's the other one?
Yes. So sorry for the gratuitousness, but you could hurl it at a wall, or you could stroke it and give it some milk. Right? Those are two things you could do, right? And
Yeah.
I was asking if those two things were equal in your mind.
No, they're not.
So why not?
Because one is only meant to harm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one is only meant to harm.
And so would you feel if you saw somebody else do something such atrocious? I think I talked about kicking a dog previously. Like if you saw somebody else kicking a dog, would that make you would you feel nothing about that, or would you feel bad about that?
I would feel really angry about that.
Right. So one of the reasons why I think we feel bad when we see other things like animals suffering is because we have empathy, right? Which is partly biological, in that we have these structures in our brains referred to as mirror neurons. Are you familiar with mirror neurons?
No, yeah, what are those?
So these are sort of parts of our mental neural networks that essentially allow us to, they're basically the physical manifestation of empathy. So when you see something happen to somebody else, or you see how another person is representing themselves, maybe they're crying or they're upset, or they're very still and quiet, or maybe they're very happy and shouting and jumping up and down. When you see those people acting in these ways, or you see another conscious creature in the world, and what you do is you try to imagine, you map what you would feel like if you were representing those behaviors. And in a way, what it allows you to do is it essentially triggers in you, not in exactly the same way, but it triggers a sort of pretend response to observing a certain behavior in another person. So if somebody's laughing, like it makes you realize that they're happy. Like it's what helps you connect, because what you think is, if I was making my face look like that and sort of reacting in that way, I would feel happy. And that allows me to then guess that this other person is happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the biomechanics of empathy. But it also works with suffering. If we see something suffering, it's not a nice feeling. Like, well, some people are okay with it, but some people, like a psychopath, for example, would not have this response. They just don't feel anything in that sense. And so they act very differently in society. But most people who have access to these mirror neurons, if they see something suffering, it makes them feel bad, right?
Yeah.
And so given the choice between watching somebody be happy and somebody be upset and suffering, like again, we could argue selfishly, or at least it would improve our own personal well-being if we were to change them from a sad person to a happy person, right? That would make us feel better.
Yeah, I will say, I feel certain I'm not a psychopath because I don't like to see people suffer.
Right.
But I will say, with those, I don't fully understand that they're called malineurons.
Malineurons?
Yeah, malineurons. I don't think my brain necessarily works the same as with other people. See, like, if I saw somebody getting hurt or something, I would empathize with them, and I would, I don't like to see somebody get hit in the face or something, or
Right.
get ran over. So that's where I say I'm not a psychopath, because that was something I was wondering about myself. But I will say, and this affects my feelings of good and bad. Like, I'm somebody who, when I saw people happy or laughing, I didn't necessarily feel good when I saw them.
Okay.
I,
Did
I
you
would
did you feel when you say you didn't feel good, as in does that mean it didn't change your mood?
a lot. Like I'm just to clarify again, I'm
Mm.
33, and when I was 19, 20, when I saw people who were happy, I would feel either jealous, sometimes angry, or just uncomfortable. A lot of times, just uncomfortable, and I would leave. Um,
Mm.
and whereas I think this is an important detail, if I saw somebody who was sad, I would feel sad along with them. I would feel like I guess I would feel kind of happy, but it's only happy because it was like, hey, here's somebody who feels like I feel. It's like here's somebody I can connect with.
Right. You can understand somebody feeling bad much more, you empathize with the position of somebody feeling bad much more easily than you empathize with the position of somebody feeling good.
Well, yeah, and specifically somebody who is sad.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's cool. But we could still, even under those circumstances, well, I suppose if you're saying that somebody feeling good makes you feel miserable, or unhappy in some way,
Yeah,
then
mostly
yeah,
uncomfortable. But
right.
now, and I have grown as a person since then.
Hmm,
Um, and I do believe that is because of God. I mean, I know that is just a belief.
that's
Um,
cool.
yeah, but now when I feel people see people happy, I kind of can feel happy with them.
Hmm. Why do you think? Why do you think the God idea has changed that for you then?
I feel like that it's somebody there helping me. Like it ultimately just gives me hope. Like I
Sure.
feel like there is something that is helping in that direction.
Some people might say that when they have some inspiration, some like a new solution occurs to them, um, or they suddenly discover an interesting idea, or whatever it is, that this is God giving them the idea. Like they might describe the act of suddenly coming up with something as it being a gift from God, and that God is acting in the world to give them this inspiration, and it wasn't really something that they determined on their own. Um, it would be. It seems to take something away from the idea that maybe it's them that's doing that and not God.
Yeah, and even as a theist, like let's even say God was real, there's still always that struggle because even if we're saying some ideas came from God, then because even us theists still say there's people who make things up or who thinks it's God, or even we believe that the devil. We even
Right.
believe that the devil pretends to be God sometimes, and it's like, see, there is always a struggle of like what comes from God, what doesn't. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'm well. I guess You obviously seem to really believe this too, but I do think it is really important to always question your thoughts, question what I think is good. Um, I mean, this is something. I think maybe this is something you agree with. Like, I think even as an atheist or theist, it's incredibly important to always question your thoughts and where they came from.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. You should challenge your assumptions. You should check your thinking and be skeptical of quick and easy solutions.
Yeah.
um, so, Jonathan, I guess here's where I'm at. I'm hearing a lot about um, the this belief that you have in a god, or I think you said it was a god or gods. Like you're not 100% sure exactly of the nature. It's not like a formal religion belief that you have. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm hearing that this belief in a sort of God entity concept is benefiting you. I think you mentioned previously you'd sort of stopped drinking, that
Yeah.
you were generally acting better, and that you were seemingly enjoying acting better in the world. Right, like this has been something that you found beneficial, which has just further reinforced the idea that this is the right path to be on. Would that be a fair way of summarizing where we're at?
Yeah. Yeah, it would.
Cool. So here's where I'm at. I'm not sure that a belief in of this sort is something I would want to take away from you, or persuade you of its falsity. I think you were very candid in our last conversation about saying that you didn't know that this was a real thing or true. Like you didn't know for sure, but you were pretty open about that. But you just had this feeling, and it was genuinely helping you, and that was seemingly a good thing from what you've described. So I'm a kind of slightly reticent to continue the conversation because it sounds like you're in a good place, but there is a caveat to that, and I think I touched on it previously, which is I honestly feel there are ways to get to the conclusions you've discovered about the world without religion, right? I think this is kind of you've spoken about your atheist friends sometimes being better than some of your theist friends, or acting better in the world than some of your theistic friends. I genuinely do feel there are reasons to act in the world in the way that you are doing that you would just continue to get the benefit from, and the advantage would be you couldn't have that belief taken away from you, right? Like if I find reasons to act good in the world and work and do kind things, and I notice the benefit of that, and I'm just happy with it, and I'm feeling like it's just because it makes sense to work this way, like it benefits me to operate in this way, then regardless of whether I believe in a God or not, I'm still going to be a good person, right? I'm going to still act in a way that's good for me, improves my well-being. Whereas I fear, genuinely, like the way you've been describing your faith, is that you could have your faith taken away from you by some situation that contradicts it, and you would be left having no strong motivators to continue to act as a good person in a way that I think you've been reflecting on has benefited you tremendously. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Just to clarify, yeah, I do think I see what you're saying, that people don't have to have a religion to try to do good. I do think these conversations, though, are good. The conversation you and me are having is good for me, even if it's challenging my belief in God. And there's a possibility that, well, I can promise you this. Like, let's say in this conversation, um, I decided to stop believing in God.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly don't think I would go and start being violent with people in the world. I would do more things because that's risky, and because I could at least say that's risky. Like, I know I could, for one, what gives me the right to do that? I can say that, and then two, what's the point in that? And three, I can say there are consequences for me doing that.
Right.
I think what I would choose most likely would be, um, see, if I stopped believing in God, I'd actually probably just go back to taking interest in the stock market. Um, that would be the biggest change. Um, I mean, I would be more rude, as in like I would just end conversations probably more
Mm-hmm.
quickly. Um,
But if there's no God, then so why do you value? What is it? Is it God that's making you value this idea of God?
is it? Wait, say ask that again.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, it's a weird question, but is it God that is making you value the idea of God?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good one. See, okay, this is more of a theist idea, but the theist idea is if we feel pain inside, that's us yearning for God. I mean,
Okay.
and so see, it's possible he is, but then again, it could just be in my head.
So the idea that there is a God in the world is certainly one thing, but like it's a different thing entirely. You seem to be expressing the fact that you value this idea, right? That this is working out for you, that it's helping you.
Yeah,
And I don't think, and I know that you expressed in our previous conversation that you believed in free will.
yeah,
And so it couldn't be free will if God was making you value these good things, right?
yeah,
And therefore, would it not be fair to say, and sorry for this all being a bit of a yes ladder, but would it not be fair to say then that there is something about you personally, Jonathan, that is valuing being a nice person and doing good things and paying more attention to the well-being of others?
yeah. Do you mind if do you mind if I step aside the God view a little bit and go
Of
into
course.
why I believe these things? I
Sure.
guess, I guess, like my late teens, early 20s, I just saw the world as an awful place. So I think that's where deep down, yes. Deep down, yes, I do see good as a good thing. There's a part of me that sees it as like, wait, I tried to do good in the world. And it's like, it just leads to me getting shit on, you know? Or that was my belief. And I see other good people who get shit on, you know? So it's like, there's a part of me when I was an atheist, I saw good as illogical. Maybe saying good is illogical rather than good is bad might be more accurate of how I'm seeing it. Do you want to keep challenging me there? Or do you mind if I ask you some questions?
You're welcome to ask me anything you like. Yeah, go for it. If that's useful for you, for sure.
Okay, yeah. So, um, a long time ago, I was watching this YouTube video of this girl who she was a native to the Americas, or her culture is that, you know, I don't like calling them Native Americans because they didn't call it America themselves. But anyhow, she was talking about how her religious faith from her culture and how um, you talk to most people around the world, they would say they feel something guiding them, or there's this idea everything happens for a reason, but I don't know if I agree with that phrase, but like something pulling them. And I was curious, like you said that you've had atheist parents.
Yes, yes.
So yeah, I guess I'm more curious on your feelings, because because yeah, I guess, have you ever felt like there was something guiding you?
I can't say that I have. Well, let me try and be honest as I can be. Let me think about it. I don't think so. I can feel there can be a sense. Well, there's solipsism which can make it feel like, because you can only ever occupy like a single perspective in the grand narrative of reality, right? To me, what it feels like to me is that everything is going on around me in a bubble of my awareness, and that is what reality is.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Right? And like that is just my subjective experience of reality. And there are things that are happening in those bubbles, and in a real sense, they are happening to me. So I could say that everything that's happening in reality it's happening to me because I'm the single point of experience that's kind of reflecting on these events. And in that sense, I guess I could say, you could fall into thinking everything is just this kind of video game, up the brain in a vat style, the Matrix kind of experience of the world. And then maybe it's all an elaborate game show or video game or experiment or something. This is the problem of solipsism, and I can certainly reflect on having feelings like that, especially when I was younger, thinking about that. But as I got older, I just began to realize that it sort of wouldn't matter if it was true or not, right? The answer is basically I have to just react to things as they appear to be, and that's all we can do. But I don't remember ever thinking. I mean, I've certainly noticed coincidences and thought that was interesting. For example, the appearance of a new word that I've never heard of. Somebody will mention it. You may have had this experience yourself. That you'll suddenly come across a word that you've never heard of before. You think, oh no, I've lived my whole life, I've never heard this word, and then suddenly you'll start hearing the word everywhere. Like people will start using it as if somebody just realized it was a word that we should have been using all this time and hadn't. Those kinds of psychological illusions are quite unsettling, and when you first notice them. Coincidence can be very compelling evidence of something that isn't true, but it can feel like evidence. And certainly I've noticed coincidences in my life. And I've had strange experiences, if it helps. I've definitely had strange experiences that I can't truly explain. At one point in my life, I genuinely felt like I had a dream of the future, which I had, I can only describe from the sense of the experience of it that I had. And it's kind of a complicated idea, but there are lots of reasons why that feeling of having a dream of the future might have occurred to me that aren't actually the fact that that's what it was. So yeah, the world, being a human being and living in a reality and seems to allow for these kinds of strange experiences all the time. And I think if you wanted to view them as something more profound, you certainly could. And I couldn't prove that it wasn't. I just don't think there's any need in doing so, because what that profound thing is, or what that more complicated reality or truth might be, is sufficiently unclear as to not warrant consideration, really.
Yeah, I guess there's one question I really want to ask you. You told me when you found the street epistemology Discord, that you felt hope. What exactly gave you hope, and like, what were you feeling before?
Yeah, so it gave me hope that there was an increasing movement, if you like, of people who were wanting to have better conversations, improve dialogue, and promote and embrace critical thinking. I think a world that adopts more of that, asking questions and applying critical thinking, would be a better world. And I think we are hugely disadvantaged by an absence of those things. And it's nice. It gives me hope to see that there are so many people all over the world coming together to try to work out how to increase those things in the world. I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think so too. I guess so. Even I can see why you believe in being good, as a sense of community, of like, hey, the more we're all good, the better it is for all of us. From an evolutionary perspective, like, why care about the whole world when it's like, when just within, a neighborhood with my coworkers, my neighbors, my friends and family, like, why care more outside of that?
Well, we tend not to, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Although I think we're sort of made to feel that it's a bad thing these days. But we tend to care more about those that are more immediately concern us. And we try to extend our empathy to sort of circumvent the entire world, but it's incredibly difficult. You know, you gave your $2 to a lady in your town, in your city, and like, you know, that probably felt more meaningful to you than giving $2 to a charity that would help somebody in a different country. And that wouldn't even have to mean that you cared less for that other person. It's just that, you know, it's very difficult to extend your empathy beyond the immediate apparent nature of your reality. And I think I don't think that's a bad thing. It's just part of human nature. So I would agree with you. Like it is harder to care about people, you know, care about the entire world. I think it would be an exhausting exercise that humans are just not equipped to deal with. But we are equipped to deal with our immediate friendships and families and our little societies and our colleagues, and we can control for those things. And we can choose how we choose to act in those situations, and maintaining good relationships in those situations is beneficial to us. For sure, 100% would be beneficial to us. It's just easier to get on in life. I think if you're a generally nice person that people like, they will help you. They will encourage you. They will support, and they will want to hang out with you and do stuff. It's just a better situation to be in. You could be disagreeable and terse and short, and sometimes I think it takes less energy to be that way. So that there's maybe an energy cost to caring for other people, but I think in aggregate, I think it pays for itself many times over. But yeah, I agree. You can't extend your empathy around the whole world. It's just not practical, and it shouldn't be something you're made to feel bad about either. Although lots of things in society will try to do that. We all have to be suddenly very empathetic towards the struggling people of XYZ country. And that's not to say we don't care about them. It's just we have to be told the stories, and the stories have to be brought to us, and we have to buy into the stories, and we have to try to empathize with people. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult to do that. This is why charities have worked very hard to find ways of trying to make those stories more relatable and more immediate for us.
Yeah. So I guess with the idea of being creating a better community, well, let me ask you this. Do you feel like everybody has the same value? Do you feel like we are all equal? Do you feel like there are some people who are better than other people?
At what?
I guess, or maybe I should say this. I guess, well, because I believe in God, I believe everybody is equal just because they exist, even if they're the worst, even if they're just a homeless person who kicks dogs. See, I guess to me, with the idea of if I'm an atheist and I'm trying to make a better community, why not? And let's say there was a narcissistic jerk. Why not ship that guy out of society? And I mean, and there were times in history where people did do that. Well,
right.
I mean, you look at genocide and things like, well, especially things like genocide, but like, I mean, or let me ask you this. Let's say 10,000 years ago, like, I think that's the Neolithic era. Let's say they just started a farming community and there was one guy who just kept stealing from everybody. Would you say they are wrong for killing that person after trying so many times to rehabilitate him and get him to stop stealing?
It's very difficult to make that make a judgment on that. I mean, it depends on why he was stealing. I mean, if it's just a compulsion of his, that he doesn't know why, that there's no motivating factor. It's just something he's doing arbitrarily, and he doesn't seem to be able to stop himself from doing it. And then it would be a case of trying to understand, well, what are the repercussions of him doing it? Like, how much harm is it genuinely causing? And if it's causing people to lose their lives or to suffer terribly or to be put at terrible danger because he's stealing things that they need, then the reality is this person is not compatible. If nothing can be done, then this person's presence in the village is not compatible with the continued safety and well-being of the village. And at that point, I would imagine it would be more humane to imprison that person, or, you know, one might argue, ideally hospitalize that person or take them out of society so they can't harm others. I don't know that killing would be a move that would be made, but if hospitalization is not an option, or imprisonment is not an option, or banishing them from the village is not an option, if there is no other way, then I could imagine that killing that person might be something that they would have to seriously consider. But that's an awful lot of ifs. Don't know if that helps.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, because it's like, yeah, it's so hard to say because we haven't lived in Neolithic culture. Like, maybe I can make this example. Like, let's say, I think you said you're married, right?
Sure.
Yeah, or like, we don't have to make her an example. Like, let's say I had a girlfriend or something, and somebody came up and just started insulting her. Like, maybe you can relate to this. Like, I know as a male, like, I think that's a scenario all of us think about. Because I know I had one friend in college. Before I knew him, he had this girl he really loved who he's dating, and this other guy he was hanging out with randomly just tackled her on the ground. And then afterwards she broke with him, and I know he was telling me this story, and he asked me, like, hey, is that why like, you know, do you think that's why she broke up with him? You know, and it's like, probably, you know, that is probably why she broke up with him. And it's like, there is this I mean, like, our society's trying to get rid of gender expectations, but they're still there. And it is like, I think as a guy, that's a scenario we think about, like, well, obviously I need to protect her, but like, what is a good way to protect her, you know? Because obviously if I handle it the wrong way, that could lead to punishment for me.
Sure. I think these scenarios are complicated, but I mean, in essence, resorting to violence to defend my wife. I mean, like, if my wife is being physically attacked, and the only way to prevent that was to engage in violence, then violence will be brought. Like, there's you know, if that's my only solution, like, it's either allow my wife to be attacked or to engage this person with violence, then I think that's the only solution. That I would certainly engage this person with violence, right? That wouldn't really be a question. But I think there are usually quite a few steps between the scenarios that led up to the violence and that necessity to make that decision, right? So I think people might choose violence when other options are available, like leaving the place where it seems to be getting to be a problem.
Yeah.
Walking away or diffusing things with you know, in other fashions. I think violence is generally a reasonable, necessary last resort, but last resort it should be. And for some people, I think it's not even low down on the list of resorts that they will attempt. But that's a very different scenario, I guess. So yeah, I mean, if I can see no other resolution and it's the choice between violence and this my wife being attacked, then I will bring violence.
Yeah.
Does that help? I don't know if that's
Yeah, and I'm trying to find a question I can try to have to challenge it. I guess if that guy, let's say there was a guy, let me know if you don't like using this example because I can see where this could not be fun. But if there was a guy who did do that to your wife, would you say they're a bad person?
It would depend on their motivations, right? Like, it would depend on why they were doing it. Yeah, I don't think it's as easily to say whether somebody just is or is not a bad person, right? Motivations are absolute, just like with the person that was stealing. It would depend on what caused them to do it. Maybe this person genuinely believes my wife has just done something utterly terrible, right? And is acting on that impulse, right? And whilst I don't want him to still attack my wife, I would say he wasn't necessarily a bad person if he genuinely believed my wife had just done something terrible to potentially feel the need to attack my wife, right? Now, it could be that he's, suffering from a mental health episode. He's compromised in some way. It could be, that he's traumatized or upset by some event. Like, there are all kinds of reasons why these outcomes may have occurred. It's certainly not. I certainly would have no way of knowing based on just the action he was taking whether or not he was, in my view, a bad person. Perhaps, and again, I think your question was like, did I believe that there were bad people? And like, I just don't know what criteria that represents, right? Because I don't know that there is such a thing as a bad or a good person in the world. There are people, and they are complicated. And I think there are some people I like more than other people, that's for sure. There are some people I find incredibly tedious and tiresome, and I just don't want to talk to them. And there are some people who I really enjoy hanging out with and talking to. So there's a judgment call there. But would I say that people I don't like, that I find tedious, are bad people? No, I just don't like them. I genuinely hope other people like them and that they find different friendships. I don't think they're a bad person. Like, if you really think about it, there's a famous example of the the Texas clock tower shooter. I forget the chap's name. I'm sure you heard of this story. It was like, I think it was like the 1980s. He climbs a clock tower and just starts shooting at people at random. And prior to that, he'd murdered his wife and children, and climbed this clock tower and started shooting people at random until eventually he was killed by the police. And they raided his home and they found a letter basically addressed to the police and said, look, I don't know what's wrong with me. I mean, this, by any metric, this man is doing as bad evil as and actions as we could imagine, right? He's a man as we could imagine, right? That he is doing things that are just atrocious. I mean, not only is he shooting random strangers from a clock tower, but he's also just murdered his wife, his loving wife, and his children. Seemingly for no reason. I mean, this is as bad as it gets. And when as I say, police raid his home, they find a letter saying, I don't know what's wrong with me. I want you to cut open my brain. I want you to do an autopsy. I want you to, there's something wrong with me. I just can't stop feeling like this. I don't know what's happened. And they do. They cut open his brain, they autopsy him, and they find that he has a tumor growing in his brain that's actually pressing on a particular part of the brain that would increase aggression.
Wow.
It was a large tumor, and he was self-aware enough to know that what had changed and literally because there were reports of him being a perfectly good husband and a caring father and a nice guy, liked at work. Everything was great, right? And then all of a sudden he turns into this monster where he murders his family and shoots people from a clock tower. and is aware enough that this isn't really him. This isn't who he's choosing to be, but he just can't help but this feeling is coming that he writes a letter to say there's something wrong with me. And so then there's a question: is that a bad man? Is that man going to heaven or hell? Did God put the tumor there? Is he a bad person, or is he sick? Is he ill? It raises a hell of a lot of questions about what we mean by good and bad people, right?
Yeah. I kind of want to clarify my beliefs a little bit here. And this, of course, I have no way of proving these either. I do believe heaven and hell is on earth. I believe where I'm at in my head is closer to heaven now. It sounds like where that guy was in hell.
Sure.
And I mean, see, and this is, I don't know if you want me to, if it's okay for me to clarify my beliefs some more.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I actually kind of believe that reincarnation is a thing, and I do think we are in places like hell and heaven, or I don't know what all kind of places we can go in between, but I don't know. See, isolation and just feeling pain. Like, this is actually my big driver for researching religion, all this stuff. In ancient Hebrew, salvation means healing, wholeness, and well-being. And there is this idea of, a Christian and Jewish idea that all pain comes from sin. Or I shouldn't say all pain, more just inner pain. Because obviously if somebody was born without an arm, that doesn't mean they sinned. And I think that, because the inner pain thing is either sin, feeling guilt for things we've done, or trauma that's been caused by us either by other people or by natural circumstances, like in that one, the tumor was a natural circumstance.
How do you distinguish between God's will and natural circumstances, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, so and see that there's a possibility that that tumor could have been God's will, possibly.
I mean, it's not an argument to prove anything, but in the atheistic view, that man just had a tumor in his brain. Tumors grow as a result of cells reproducing inaccurately and resulting in these physical deformities, which can either be trivial, minor, or fatal. And they can certainly, when those changes occur in the brain, will change who we are in a very real sense. And so from an atheistic view, the tumor was a fairly complete and comprehensive explanation as to the behavior of that man.
Yeah.
But in a time before we understood tumors, in a time before we were able to autopsy brains, how would we have described the behavior of this person? It would be quite a simple thing to do and quite a compelling argument to say he was possessed by the devil. This man, perfectly normal man, nice man, suddenly turns into this horrific monster. Writes a letter to say, I don't know what's happened to me. He may think he's possessed by the devil. This rage has come upon him. He feels nothing but wrath. Without knowing the biology or even suspecting the biology, the only explanation might be that the devil has possessed this person. And a compelling argument it would be. But now we know it was a tumor, a perfectly common, unfortunately, side effect of our biology. So from an atheistic worldview, there's nothing further to explain. Now, that's not proving that the theistic worldview is the correct one, but it certainly becomes more complicated when you now have to decide whether God put the tumor there or not. Did God therefore want the wife and child to die? Were the random strangers in the street a lesson that God was teaching somebody else? What are the repercussions of that event? Why would God possibly want those things to happen? Were they all sinners? Did God? I'm sure many of the people shot were good and decent people. It would be hard to say that they would all be terrible sinners. Certainly, God doesn't seem to be discriminate in that way. Just becomes much more complicated to try to understand how or why those situations would have occurred.
Yeah, so obviously, yeah, the tumor caused him to be in a scenario where it's like really difficult to act. Really difficult to act. Sorry, a plane's going by.
That's okay.
Yeah, so obviously the cops, the guy, the tumor caused him to feel, yeah, this intense rage all the time. At the same time, he was self aware enough to write a letter, and he could have, I just shouldn't say easily. I mean, maybe the guy could have been able to call 911 and say, hey, these are the feelings I'm having, if he was able to write a letter.
We could speculate about that, but I think like not knowing how that person must have felt in that moment, I think it's very difficult to speculate about that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so we can't, yeah, I can't speculate on his I can't, just definitely can't definitively say what he would have been capable of,
Right.
what exactly he was feeling. On the idea of free will, this is something that we come to with theism all the time. Is like, if he, see, we get put in these scenarios where it is very difficult to make the right choice. And I don't know what God's intent was behind it. And one idea is maybe that guy was being tested. I don't know. I just think, maybe I should say this, from the idea of free will, I think looking at that story, the lesson I take from it is, if I do feel an intense amount of rage, to seek help, even though I know, like, a lot of times in those scenarios, like, it has to be really difficult for professionals too, because they don't automatically know to go do a brain scan and see if the guy has a tumor, you know. But so, I mean, it would be difficult even to get help in those scenarios. But I do look at that and I'm like, wait, if I'm feeling these feelings, even if I can't get help, try my best to figure out whatever good is, you know, and pray to God. I don't know. That's all I take from it.
It's difficult though, because as I say, it's a much more challenging problem to have to solve. You know, as I say, from a atheist perspective, it's totally explained, but from a religious perspective, it's much more complicated.
Yeah.
I also reminded of like Fräulein Fritzl, the young girl who was imprisoned by her father, who I believe was a religious man, although that may be a misrecollection on my part. But this gentleman kept his daughter hidden from society in a basement, and since her birth, so she'd never left the basement. Fed her and just kept her in squalid conditions, and would, once she reached a certain age, would regularly go down and rape and abuse her. She had several children by her father, and he would molest them also, and they were also kept in these squalid conditions. I mean, it's just about as horrific a story as you can imagine, right? It's like her whole life, she was living in this nightmare. If hell means something, it must mean something like this. And you know, she was eventually found. I think she was 25, 26 or something, where she was eventually found and rescued. Maybe she was a little bit older. She was eventually found and rescued, and her father, who was incredibly old at that point, only served a few years in jail before he passed away. What is God's message? Why? What? You could say that this girl was being punished for past sins. That's something that the Buddhists might suggest. That the sins of her past led to her this happening to her in this life. But she certainly wasn't. That certainly confuses me, because I don't understand what lesson she could possibly have learned from this experience that would encourage her to be better in the next life, because we don't seem to be remembering of our past lives, so if that's the case. So her torture now seems like it's torturing a different person. Like, it makes no sense to me whatsoever that she should be being tortured and treated in such a way because of the sins of a past life that she can't remember. If we say, well, it's okay because God is going to make it okay when she goes to heaven, and he's going to make everything okay somehow, I don't understand that either. How was this level of suffering on earth going to be made up for in heaven? Is she going to have a better time in heaven because of the suffering she had on earth? Is there going to be some kind of accountancy done, and she gets extra time in heaven or something? I don't. Do you know what I mean? It's the mathematics of this is incredibly weird. If we have to say that there's a moral and loving, caring God that's operating in the world, that's choosing to do these things on purpose. But unfortunately, again, from an atheist perspective, it makes perfect sense. Some people are cruel and hateful and will do horrible and terrible things if they're put in a position of power where they can feel that they will get away with it. This is unfortunately a byproduct of our biology and our natures.
So with the girl, because with the sin, there is the one, the guilt we feel for as punishment, but then there's also just the trauma. So with the girl, this is just my thoughts. I don't think that she got treated that way because of sins from her past life. Mm-hmm. I think it was just that guy acting out of his free will. I do think that was him acting out of his free will. And then, so I think he will be punished in some way, somehow. And I think it will be a just punishment. But that's just me speculating. But, so yeah, I do think she did just get the bad end of the stick. Even with the theist, I think that just bad things happen, and it is because of free will. But this is a wild thing. I'm even open to the idea of, if reincarnation is real, we might possibly choose our parents knowing full well that our parents might be bad. And this is one reason where I think I've talked to a lot of people who have had a very abusive parents. And a lot of them say that through that abuse, it somehow made them a better person. That's not me excusing the bad parents.
And certainly would not be a universal sentiment, I'm sure. I'm sure there are lots of people who have had horrific experiences with abusive parents and do not feel that they're a better person or better equipped to deal with life as a result, right? That would be quite an extraordinary claim.
Yeah. This is back to the good thing, or how to be good in the world. See, and this is actually selfish. You know how you said the self, like doing good to try to get others to be good in the world? My selfish motive for being good is actually to gain knowledge. Like, I try to be, like, I was an Uber driver for a long time, and I try to be nice to people actually to get info. And while I was an Uber driver, people did open up to me, and hearing their perspective, hearing their stories and getting their perspective did expand my worldview, and it did I feel like it did bring me closer to truth, whether there's God or not.
Let me give you Jonathan, these conversations continue to be awesome, and I want to continue to have them because I think they're really interesting. But we've come up to the hour again. But I'd like to, if it's okay with you, I'd like to continue the conversation for sure. And I'd also like to leave this conversation with an allegory that might be useful to think about, or maybe not. I'm not sure, but it's a good. I like it as an allegory. It's the story of there's a man standing outside of a room, and a dog walks into the room, and he sees it's quite a nasty looking dog. It's quite a scary looking dog, and the dog goes into the room, and after a few moments, the dog comes back out of the room, really angry, really hostile, really frustrated. His hair's on end. He's slivering. He's just really angry dog, very, very frustrated, much worse than when he went in. And he looks exhausted. He looks frustrated. He looks like he's very angry, and eventually the dog goes away. And then a few moments later, another dog comes along, jumping up and down happily. Just seems to be having a great day. And this dog goes into the same room. And a few moments later, that same dog comes out, even more excited, bouncing up and down, really yappy, clearly having the day of his life. He's just in a great mood. And the man standing outside of the room, starts to speculate on what possibly could be in the room that had the effect of making the angry dog more angry and the happy dog more happy. He was like trying to work out what could possibly be in the room. So in the end, his curiosity got the better of him, and he went in the room, and all he saw was a mirror. And I think that that's something I've thought about quite a bit in my life. I think that's an interesting way of reflecting on how we approach the world.
Yeah. Wait. So what does that mean? Is it like, does it mean you can understand why one dog was happy, one dog was angry by like exploring yourself?
Well, the angry dog went into the room with the big mirror, and when the angry dog went into the room, the angry dog saw another angry dog, and that made that dog more angry, right? Like it escalated the anger. And so that angry dog just saw the angry dog and felt even worse because of it. And now that dog's world was full of angry dogs. and the more angry he got about that, the worse the dog that he could see got about that. But then the same is true for the happy dog, right? The happy dog bounced into the room, and what does he see? He sees another happy dog.
Oh, yeah.
And so his world is now full of happy dogs. And so it makes him even happier and overexcited. Now he's seeing this happy, playful dog. And
sorry.
That's okay.
Story. Yeah, I don't think I heard everything you said, so I got a little lost. But now I get it. It is true. Like, it reminds me of an allegory. Do you have time to say, or do you have to go?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's one that goes like, when there's 20, let's say there's 20 men crossing a bridge into one town. It's actually 20 men walking across 20 bridges into 20 towns. Obviously the same idea, like we literally all have our own little world. I don't know.
Right. That's interesting. I like that. That's nice. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. But like, I think the analogy with the dogs in the mirror, I think that the allegory is useful because I think there's something really true about the fact that the world generally seems to mirror our own energy back at us, right? So you talk about like flipping people off and being angry and like just not being like a good person in the world, or when you didn't believe in God and you were being more hedonistic, right? And as a result, I would imagine the world was kind of reflecting that back at you, right? You would likely get into more arguments. Those people that you were flipping off, they were flipping you off too, right? You were living in a world where everybody was sticking fingers up at each other, right? And like that's the world you were in, and that doesn't feel like a very nice world. But then like if you start to do things like now you're in a world where you've seen yourself do something kind for another person and saw how happy it made them, and that made you feel happy.
Yeah.
And so in some senses, like I genuinely think like it's certainly not always true, right? It's not to say that you can be the happiest guy in the world and people can treat you like garbage, right? That's certainly true, right? But I think in general, the world does tend to reflect back what you put out. People, if you smile at somebody, they will likely smile at you back. If you're kind to them, they'll be kind to you. Like mostly this is how most things work.
Do you feel like that's evidence for God at all?
Nope, I don't think so. But I still think it's true. And I think it's kind of beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
I don't think it's evidence of God. I just think it's evidence of conscious creatures operating in a society. But I don't think it's any less beautiful because I don't believe it's from God. I still think it's awesome.
Yeah, it is really beautiful. Yeah, it's so wild to think of. Well, yeah, thanks for sharing that.
That's cool, man. I'm really looking forward to our next conversation. I enjoyed the last one, and this one's been, if anything, even more awesome. So let's continue to chat. But thanks so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to let's try and book someone for next week, and we'll just keep these going until we feel we've done enough.